Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. The satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself among the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, "We will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God." So these administrators and satraps went as a group to the king and said, "May King Darius live forever." The royal administrators, prefects, satraps, advisors, and governors have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days except to you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, your majesty, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered, in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. So King Darius put the decree in writing. Now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. "Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den?" The king answered, "The decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed." Then they said to the king, "Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, your majesty, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day." When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. Then the men went as a group to King Darius and said to him, "Remember, your majesty, that according to the law of the Medes and Persians, no decree or edict that the king issues can be changed." So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating and without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" Daniel answered, "May the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." The king was overjoyed and gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. And before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. Then King Darius wrote to all the nations and peoples of every language in all the earth, "May you prosper greatly. I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you for being here again today. Welcome to IKIR TV News 6. I'm your reporter, Eileen OnGod, and it's a wonderful thing to have our telecast. You know, it is challenging that it's such an early time in the morning, but all of your encouraging notes and letters make it so worthwhile. We've had some incredible stories, phenomenal stories and interviews these last several weeks, and we have nothing short of a miraculous one for you today. Would you please help me to welcome today's guest, Daniel. Daniel, hi. Have a seat, please.
Thank you. So nice to be on your show.
Welcome.
Thank you. I really enjoy your show. You have such compelling stories to tell.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, it is in large part for the fascinating guests that we continue to have like yourself.
Oh,
thank you for coming today. Oh my goodness. So I wanted to know a little bit about you, and can you tell me before we go into your harrowing story of coming from a lion's den, I believe, straightway. But actually, before we get into that, Daniel, you look so well groomed and so well kept. I thought our researchers said you were coming directly from a den of lions.
Well, I actually did come directly from the den of lions, but you know, that's the great thing about God, is that when you go, you're going to go through some trials and you're going to go through some tests, but when you go through with God, you never look like what you've been through.
You never look like what you've been through. Oh my goodness, a girlfriend of mine is going through some things like that right now. May I share that with her?
Oh, absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
don't look like you've been through.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Oh, thank you for allowing me to use that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Daniel, can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
So yeah, I actually was born in Judah, and I was a part of the nobility there. So I served in the royalty in the royal court of King Jehoiakim, and I served there until King Nebuchadnezzar came along and actually conquered Judah. And when King Nebuchadnezzar conquered Judah, he ordered that certain men from the royal family, from the nobility, be brought back to Babylon. And he said he wanted men who were of fine appearance and without flaw. Thank you very much. And he also said he wanted men that were quick to learn and quick to study, because what he wanted to do was bring people back, train them in the culture and in the language of Babylon, so that they could then serve him. So myself, I was brought back, and there were 3 men that were brought with me. Their names, as they're known around here, they're known as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So we spent our 3 years really in training and education, and then since then we've been in the service of the king since that time.
Oh my goodness, that's fascinating. You know, Daniel, I beg your pardon. I know under King Nebuchadnezzar you served as Belteshazzar. Would you prefer to be called that, or would you prefer Daniel?
Oh no, actually, you know what? I'm glad that you asked that. That's very nice of you. But actually, I do prefer Daniel. That would be absolutely
great. A lot easier for me to say. Okay, no problem. Thank you for sharing your beginnings. I have to say, though, it must have been very difficult for you to be ripped from your homeland and having to learn a new culture and a new language.
You know, actually, I love Judah. I love the land. I love the people. And it certainly was hard to leave all that behind. But I think really the most difficult part of coming to Babylon wasn't so much leaving Judah behind as when we got here, they don't worship God here. So there were a lot of attempts from the people here to actually get us to leave behind worshiping God and just to worship King Nebuchadnezzar.
Oh my goodness. Well, what kind of things did they try to make you to do?
Well, there were a few real big things, but really a lot of it was just, you know, that's how they try and get you with a bunch of little things just to make you compromise, you know?
I understand, yeah.
So, you know, like when we first got here, the chief official came to us and they wanted to feed us from the buffet of the king and the wine of the king. But we really, the four of us were like, no, we can't eat that because that would defile us in the eyes of our God. And so we said to him, we said, can you just give us just a diet of vegetables and water, and we'd be perfectly happy with that. And he said, I don't really care what people eat. He said, it makes no difference to me. He said,
Yeah.
But the problem is, if you start looking less healthy and you start looking thinner and sicker than the other men, he said, well, that could be my head for disobeying the order of the king.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And so, what transpired?
Well,
Did he let you do it? Or?
Well, we actually were. We were able to convince him that he just let us try the diet for 10 days.
Okay.
And that we would address it again, at the end of the 10 days, depending on how we look. But I tell you, the beautiful thing was, at the end of that 10 days, we were actually looking more vigorous and healthier and more energetic than all the other men that had been brought with us.
That's amazing. Daniel, what do you attribute that to?
Well, I tell you, I don't think it was necessarily what we ate that made the difference. I think it was really why we ate it. Because, we were eating it to please God. We were eating it because what God had called us to do. And really what I have found happens is when you do things to please God, you end up looking better in the eyes of men as well. The problem is when you start living day by day, always trying to look good in the eyes of men, well, then you start looking bad in the eyes of God, and really, eventually you end up looking bad in the eyes of both man and God.
Wow, that's a lot of wisdom. What kind of other things did the king try to get you to do?
Well, I actually had a pretty good relationship with the king. There were certainly a lot of times. I tell you, one of the early memories that I have, one of the big events, kind of when we first came to Babylon.
Yeah.
We were serving as his officials, and the king had a dream that greatly disturbed him.
Oh.
And he called all his sorcerers and officials before him, and he said, look, this is what I want you to do. He said, I want you to tell me what my dream was, and then I want you to interpret the dream for me. And all the officials and the sorcerers said, but king, you can't hold us to that. That's impossible to do. And you know what? They were half right when they said it was impossible.
Wait, did I hear you correctly? It sounded like you said the king wanted all of these sorcerers, wizards, and all of these people to tell him what his dream was.
That's right.
To tell him what his dream was, and then to interpret that dream. Is that right? Did I hear correctly?
You did absolutely hear correctly.
You can't do that. Why did you say they were half right?
Well, because here's where they were half right. The half that was right is that man himself is not able to do that.
Oh.
The part that they missed, though, is that with God, all things are possible. And this is one of the amazing things. I went to God and I said, God, if it be your will, reveal to me what the dream was and how to interpret it. And I thank God that he came through for me again. And I was actually able to go to the king and tell him what his dream was and then interpret that dream for him.
Oh my God.
And I couldn't believe what happened next. Because the king himself actually bowed down before me.
To you?
He bowed down before me. I tried to tell him, get up, it's not me, it's God. But he bowed down before me, and then he started lavishing me with gifts. And he put me in a high place in the kingdom. And I tell you, he even said this. He said that surely Daniel's God is the God of gods.
What a miracle!
And the Lord of kings. The king said that God is the Lord of kings.
Wow. This is incredible.
Yeah.
That's so miraculous. I mean, I would think it would be smooth sailing from there. How could anything go wrong after that?
Well, this is the thing with men, particularly men of wealth and power, men who are used to saying, do this and it gets done, saying, say that and it gets said, is that when serving God benefits them, they love you. But as soon as it doesn't benefit them that you serve God, they can turn very quickly because they've forgotten that it's God that they need and not the wealth and the power.
Oh. Yeah. Oh my goodness, that's incredible. So what happened after that to cause such, you end up eventually in the lion's den? What transpired?
Well, I'll tell you, just to give you an illustration of how that power can kind of turn things is, Right, so this is almost immediately after that. You remember my 3 friends that I told you back, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego?
Yes, I remember.
Right, and you remember that huge golden statue that the king built?
Yes, a tribute to his huge, huge ego. I remember that too.
That's right. Well, when he had done that, he actually called all the officials together and he said, when the music plays, everybody must bow down before this statue that I built. And of course, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego could not bow down and worship that idol that he had built.
Oh, I see. Of course they wouldn't do that.
Right.
What happened?
So what happened was, I mean, you can imagine how furious the king is. I mean, that's a great embarrassment to the king that they're disobeying him in front of all these important officials that he has in the land.
Oh, yes.
And he got so furious that he actually threw them into a fiery furnace, and this furnace was so hot that it actually killed the men that were throwing them into the furnace.
Oh, Daniel. Oh, Daniel, I'm sorry for the loss of your friends.
Oh no, I'm sorry. That's bad on my part. I apologize, because you know what? They are actually fine. What happened was, right after they were thrown in there, Nebuchadnezzar looked real hard into the fire. He said, "Wait a minute, didn't we throw 3 men in there?" And they were saying, "Yeah, we threw 3 men." He said, "Well, I see 4 men walking around.
What?
And one of them looks like the Son of Man." And immediately Nebuchadnezzar said, he said, "Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, come out of there." And when they came out completely unsinged. Not even a hair on their head was burnt. And even their clothes didn't smell like smoke.
Excuse me, I'm usually very professional. But miracle after miracle after miracle. Oh my God.
Our God is good.
Fantastic.
Our God is good.
Listen, so after those things, what possible issue could the king find with you?
Well, my situation was a little bit different than what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego went through. See, after King Nebuchadnezzar, you know King Darius is on the throne now.
Yes.
So I actually found a lot of favor with King Darius. He really appreciated all that I did. He appreciated my honesty. The fact that he really loved the fact that I worked as if I was working for God and not for him, because it held me to a real high standard.
Wow, yes.
And so he actually elevated me to a high position over a lot of people that I actually used to report to.
Uh-oh.
Right? So King Darius, I don't think ever would have thrown me in the lion's den. But these men who were used to having power and now had to answer to me became jealous, and they started looking for a way that they could get to me. And so what they did was they actually tricked King Darius.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
Yeah. So they actually went to King Darius and they convinced him to issue a law, an irrevocable law.
Oh my God, those irrevocable laws are trouble.
Yeah. So they made him issue an irrevocable law saying
Wow.
that anybody who prayed to any god or any person within the next 30 days besides the king himself had to be thrown into the lion's den.
Daniel!
Well, they knew I had to still continue to pray to my God.
Daniel!
So they sought me out, caught me while I was praying, and went before the king and reported it to him. And he really tried as hard as he could to keep from throwing me into the lion's den. But eventually, when the evening came and nothing else, they reminded him that's an irrevocable law.
I'm telling you.
And so King Darius did that evening throw me into the lion's den and roll the stone over it and seal it up.
Daniel, oh my God. Aren't you excited? I know I am. Tell us what happened next.
So, well, actually, I got a real good night's sleep. As I was being brought to the lion's den, I remembered something that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had told me when they were before the king at that fiery furnace. And they said, "The Lord our God can protect us." They said, "But if he doesn't, we cannot serve any god besides our God." So as I was walking up to that lion's den, that was going through my mind. I was thinking, you know what? My God has been so good to me. My God has already protected me from so many things, so many times that I should have been dead already, and God has brought me through it.
Wow, yes.
And I said, you know what? I've got no choice but to serve my God. So why am I going to serve him and then worry about what the consequences are?
Daniel.
And I tell you, as soon as I was thrown into that lion's den, an angel came down and shut...
An angel?
An angel came down and shut the mouths of those lions.
Oh my goodness.
So I rested my head on the chest of one of the lions, and I went off to sleep.
Stuffed animals. Oh, I'm sorry, I just had an idea. No, I'm sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
So, actually, as I was laying there, I wasn't worried about the lions at all. What was really the only thing that I had on my mind of any concern at all was, now that God had brought me through this, I was a little just thinking, boy, what are these men going to try when I get out of this to try and get me again?
Wow, so yeah, after that was over, what happened with those evil men?
Well, let's just say I don't have to worry about those evil men anymore, because once I came out and Darius saw that God had protected me, I had done nothing to betray him or to betray my God, he was so furious with the men that had tricked him that he had them thrown into the lion's den, and before their feet ever hit the ground, well, let me just say, the lions were not as kind to them as they had been to me.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Ooh. So Daniel, this has been miracle after miracle after miracle. God has shown himself mighty and strong. As you've taken us on this journey, I have to ask you, Daniel, looking back now in retrospect, what lesson would you say that you have taken from the journey that you've lived thus far?
That's a good question. You are good at this.
I
Make me comfortable right at the beginning, and then a thought-provoking question like that at the end. I'm just buying time right now while I think about it. But no, seriously, actually, it's a very easy question to answer, though. What I really learned through all this is that there are times when we face enemies that seem bigger than we are, that seem stronger than we are. We face situations and enemies that we're like, boy, I just don't see how I can get out of this. And what I learned through this is, when you face those enemies, instead of focusing on that strong enemy in front of you, focus on all the enemies that God has already defeated on your behalf.
Oh yes, Daniel, that is such wisdom. I understand why you are considered a very wise man. And I want to thank you for this incredible, phenomenal interview that we've had today. Well, thank you all for tuning in to IKIR TV News 6 once again. Please tune in again, where we'll have more inspiring stories from the men and women of God. Remember, God loves you.
And so do we.